Welcome to the Department of Debucation. I'm Dr. Deborah Duncan Owens, a literacy education professor, a researcher, but most of all, I'm a teacher with over 3 decades on the front lines of education. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, please be kind enough to subscribe. It would be much appreciated. The problem with perpetuating the so-called reading wars is that sharp lines are drawn, and victory is too often declared by one side or another. Emily Hanford of the Sold a Story podcast fame did not start the science of reading movement, but she certainly did arm one side of the war. Those are the anti-balanced reading models, the reading crisis mongers, and the corporate asset funded warriors who have absolutely no problem laying the blame on certain individuals like Lucy Calkins, Irene Fountas, Su Pinnell, and the late Maury Clay, and publishing companies like Heinemann Press for developing programs and materials aligned with a balanced literacy model, which is focused on both building reading skills like phonics, as well as developing a love for reading and writing. I think that rather than talking about the reading wars, it's more accurate to talk about the war on reading. The science of reading movement proponents declared a resounding victory and led the charge in eliminating balanced literacy programs for many large school districts. Victory for the science of reading movement. But wait, the NAEP 2024 test scores revealed a different reality. The average score for fourth graders on the NAEP reading test in 2024 was 215. And it's hard to explain why fourth grade students scored an average of 217 on the 1992 NAEP assessment. I mean, more than 30 years ago, fourth grade students scored higher than students now. Yep, you heard that right. 30 years ago, the average fourth grade reading score on NAEP was higher than the average score in 2024, when we would have expected significantly higher scores with the infusion of the science of reading movement programs in so many of our nation's schools and the all-out war on balanced literacy models. Balanced literacy as a model for teaching reading was developed in the 1990s. It was seen at the time as a way to resolve the reading wars by incorporating or balancing the best aspects of both an alphabetics, phonics approach with the whole language model. Now, here's the thing. If balanced literacy is so bad, why is it that average NAEP scores for the fourth grade reading test were pretty much the same or better during the decade in which balanced literacy was in widespread use across the country? And Lucy Calkins, she seems to be enemy number one for the science of reading movement folks. Her balanced literacy programs were specifically targeted as the cause for the supposed reading crisis in the U.S. But in 2013, NAEP assessment for fourth grade reading saw its highest ever average reading score, 223, 7 points higher than 2024. How do the science of reading movement folks explain that away? Oh, yes. Now, there's a lot of reporting about the pandemic's enduring negative impacts on academic achievement. I mean, it is true. It's pretty difficult to teach early reading skills online during a lockdown. And there's consistent reporting these days about an increase in student absenteeism. And that's indeed a problem. But I gotta tell you, I'd have expected at least a modicum of overall improvement based on the claims by the science of reading movement proponents. Well, it seems that Emily Hanford's Sold a Story podcast could be countered with a podcast entitled Sold a Bill of Goods. Why do I say this? Well, first and foremost, because of the not so subtle inference that in the past, the process of how to teach reading was not based on science. And that is patently false. The use of scientific reading research was ever present, and in many ways cutting edge at the time when different types of reading programs were being developed. I mean, even the Dick and Jane series, so often excoriated as anti science because of its use of the whole word method, was based on the groundbreaking research of one of our nation's preeminent educational researchers, William Gray of the University of Chicago. Second, to imply that phonics was not being taught in the past as part of learning how to read is false. Rather, the essentiality of phonics when learning to read was clearly established at the beginning of the 21st century, and in fact has been part of learning to read even before that. The issue was, and still is, to what extent should phonics be taught to the complex variety of students in our nation's classrooms? And third, to blame a few, but in particular one person, Lucy Calkins, for all the reading problems experienced by some students in America just makes no sense. And by the way, there is no reading crisis in the United States. I mean, don't take my word for it. Catherine Snow, co-chair of the Literacy and Language Concentration at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, was asked about these assertions. And she stated that, well, maybe we haven't always done the greatest of jobs. We have certainly not created a reading crisis. And Catherine Snow should know. She chaired a federally funded comprehensive report in 1998 entitled Preventing Reading Difficulties in Young Children. But this supposed reading crisis is the fuel that the science of reading movement uses to stoke the flames that keep the reading wars going. The American public has indeed been sold a bill of goods, and we now have the receipts. And although NAEP test scores should always be viewed with a healthy dose of skepticism, they do reveal the truth that all those science of reading aligned early reading programs also require a skeptical view. Thank you. More to come.